Before the Jamison family disappeared, they were already a mystery. In the months before, Bobby had gone to his pastor to tell him he was seeing between 2 and 4 spirits on the roof of his house, and to ask where he could get special bullets to shoot them. Sherilynn had written messages about neighborhood witches on the walls of their storage unit. Their 6-year-old daughter had an imaginary friend named Emily, whom her mother had come to identify as a demonic entity. And in the final days before they left and never came back, the family had $32,000 in cash that no one has ever been able to explain. This file begins in that house. Before the woods. Before the bodies. Before the photo. On October 8, 2009, at a time that has never been precisely documented, a family left their home in Eufaula, Oklahoma, and never came back. There was no note, no warning, no sign that something was about to go wrong, beyond everything that had already been going wrong for months. 16 days later, off-road hunters found their truck abandoned on an unnamed road in Latimer County. Inside, wallets, ID documents, cell phones, the GPS, $32,000 in cash in the toolbox. And their dog, Maisie, alive, but so malnourished she could barely stand. Of Bobby Jamison, his wife Sherilynn, and their 6-year-old daughter Madyson, there was no trace. 4 years and 1 month later, 2 hunters found skeletal remains in the Smokestack Hollow area, on Panola Mountain. 2 adults and a child, face down, side by side, a mile and a half from where the truck had been found. On July 3, 2014, the Oklahoma office of the chief medical examiner confirmed the identities: Bobby, Sherilynn, and Madyson Jamison. Cause of death, undetermined. The case remains open. No suspects. No answers. And on the phone Bobby left inside the truck, there was a photograph of his daughter in the woods, taken that day, wearing a red jacket that, according to some accounts, she wasn't wearing. That photo was never explained. This file doesn't begin in the woods. It begins in the house. Bobby Dale Jamison was 44 years old in 2009. He had been in a car accident that left him with chronic back problems, and as a result was registered as disabled and not working. Sherilynn Leanne Jamison was 40. She was also on disability. Madyson Stormy Star Jamison was 6 years old and, until shortly before the disappearance, attended school. Her parents withdrew her. They lived on the shores of Lake Eufaula, in a house they shared with their dog Maisie and the accumulated weight of the past several months. Bobby and Sherilynn were not people who had chosen isolation. They had connections, a pastor, relatives, old acquaintances, but those connections had been loosening as the family's situation deteriorated. There is something in the image of that family. 2 sick adults, a small child, a house fitted with security cameras out of fear, that this file must hold onto throughout. They are not abstract figures. They are real people who were in a state of extreme vulnerability before anything else happened. The months leading up, the net tightens. To understand what happened on October 8th, you have to understand what was happening in the months before. And what was happening was a convergence of simultaneous pressures, all of them documented. The first, Bobby's father, Bob Dean Jamison, was in a legal dispute with his son over unpaid debts from a family gas station. Bobby had filed a restraining order against his father, claiming he had threatened to kill him and tried to run him over with a vehicle in 2008. A judge dismissed the order in May 2009. The father would die in December of that year, 2 months after the family disappeared. The second, a tenant named Kenneth Bellows, had been living in the Jamison home. In August 2009, Sherilynn forced him out at gunpoint after his white supremacist beliefs surfaced, and after Bellows discovered Sherilynn's Native American heritage. What happened between them during the time they lived together is unknown. And the third is what sets the tone for everything else. During those same months, Bobby began visiting Pastor Gary Brandon to talk about his house. He told him he was seeing between 2 and 4 spirits on the roof. He asked if he knew where to get special bullets to shoot them. Sherilynn also visited the pastor separately, telling him she had seen the spirits near Madyson inside the house, and that she had the ability to cast out demons. Later, Bobby confessed to the pastor that he had been reading the Satanic Bible in an attempt to exorcise the home. On the family's storage unit, located outside the house, Sherilynn had spray-painted messages about cats that had been poisoned by witches in the neighborhood. And Madyson, 6 years old, had an imaginary friend named Emily. Sherilynn had come to identify her as a demonic entity. These are not details from a horror story. They are documented statements given by the pastor to police, and they are part of the official record. The family's mental and spiritual deterioration was visible to those around them, and no one intervened before what happened. The place they were heading. The Sans Bois are the hills of southeastern Oklahoma. Dense forest, rough terrain, very few people. The nearest town to where the family disappeared is Red Oak, with fewer than 600 residents. The region has a history. Locally known for its beauty as much as for its criminal activity, methamphetamine trafficking runs deep in those mountains. Bobby had reported a neighbor for running a clandestine drug lab not long before. The stated reason for the trip was practical. The family wanted to look at a 40-acre plot near Red Oak they were considering buying to live on. They wanted out of Eufaula. They wanted a fresh start somewhere else. If that's what they were looking for in the Sans Bois, a new beginning, a way out, they never found it. The night of October 8th. The video. The security cameras Bobby had installed in his home, out of fear of his father, recorded the night of October 8th. What those images show is the most disturbing element of the entire file before the bodies are found. Bobby and Sherilynn load the truck. Around 20 trips back and forth between the house and the vehicle. On some of those trips their hands are empty. They walk out, stop by the truck, and walk back with nothing. They don't look at each other. They don't speak. They move with a uniform, repetitive, dissociated slowness. Investigators who reviewed the footage described it as the behavior of people in a trance state. At one point, Sherilynn loads a brown briefcase into the truck. That briefcase was never found. The case file records that the description of a trance is an interpretation, not a diagnosis. The behavior observed in the video could be consistent with several states: severe dissociation due to depression, the effects of medication, an altered state of consciousness, or simply the physical and mental exhaustion of two people at the breaking point of their resources. No toxicological analysis exists prior to the disappearance to determine what they were taking at the time. But the footage exists, and the footage is what it is. The truck. On October 16th, 16 days after the family left Eufaula, 2 off-road hunters found Bobby's truck abandoned on an unnamed road in Latimer County. The doors weren't locked. Inside, Bobby and Sherilynn's wallets, their ID documents, their cell phones, the GPS, and in Bobby's toolbox, $32,000 in cash. No signs of struggle, no blood, no note, and in the back seat, Maisie, the family dog, alive, but so malnourished and dehydrated she could barely get up. She had been there alone, without water or food, for at least 2 weeks. Someone who abandons a truck in the mountains by their own choice doesn't typically leave behind the family's ID documents, their phones, their wallets. The GPS doesn't leave $32,000. And under normal circumstances, doesn't leave the dog. Unless they left thinking they would come back. or unless they didn't leave on their own. Both possibilities are in the file. Neither has been confirmed or ruled out. The search. News of the truck triggered a massive search. More than 300 volunteers and officers combed the area for days. Tracking dogs were deployed. Known roads, dense vegetation zones, and ravines were all searched. They found nothing. Many investigators wish they had as many leads as we do. The problem is, they point in too many directions, Sheriff Beecham remarked. The OSBI, the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation, initially stated they did not believe a crime had occurred. That statement was later revised, after the remains were found and the medical examiner could not determine a cause of death. Sheriff Beecham resigned in 2011, 2 years after the disappearance, with the case still unsolved. According to later reports, he couldn't bear the feeling of never having found Madyson's killer. He moved abroad. He has not spoken publicly about the case since. The origin of the money. The file has to stop at the $32,000 because there is no way to move past them. Bobby and Sherilynn Jamison were both registered as disabled. Neither had known employment income. The family faced documented financial difficulties. There is no public record that explains the origin of those $32,000 in cash. Theories about that money have gone in several directions since 2009. The most widely circulated in popular analysis of the case, the family was somehow involved in the area's drug trade. The region has a documented history of methamphetamine activity. Bobby had reported a neighbor for running a clandestine lab. The behavior in the video could be consistent with substance use. The file notes that hypothesis with the honesty it deserves. It is a possibility, but there is no direct evidence to confirm it. Police found no drugs in either the house or the truck. The money was not taken. If there was a deal, whoever killed them didn't take what was supposed to be the payment. And there's a question that hypothesis doesn't answer. Why bring a 6-year-old girl to a drug deal in the mountains? The origin of the money remains in the file without a verified explanation. The testimonies. The most significant testimony in the case belongs to Pastor Gary Brandon, the only source who directly documents the mental state of Bobby and Sherilynn in the months before their disappearance. Brandon told police that Bobby had said he was seeing between 2 and 4 spirits on the roof of his house, that he had asked where to get special bullets for them, and that he had admitted to reading the Satanic Bible as an attempt to exorcise the home. Sherilynn, in her own separate conversation, had confirmed seeing the spirits and said she had the ability to cast them out. Pastor Brandon left the area shortly after the disappearance. He has not spoken publicly since. He was the person closest to the family during that critical period, and after speaking with police, he disappeared from the case. That silence is a gap in the file. There's no way Bobby and Sherilynn would have let anything happen to Madyson unless something had been done to them first. Connie Cocotan, Sherilynn's mother. Cocotan also claimed that her daughter was on a target list of a cult operating in southeastern Oklahoma. She named no one. She provided no supporting evidence. The file notes her statement in that context. High personal credibility, no documentary support for the specific claim about the cult. Nikki Chenault, a friend of Sherilynn's, stated that Sherilynn had told her Bobby would sometimes approach her with his eyes completely black, dead-looking, as if it weren't him. Sherilynn interpreted this as possession. Nikki doesn't believe the supernatural is behind the deaths, but she confirmed that Sherilynn lived inside that belief system with a seriousness her acquaintances did not share. The remains and their story, what they told us and what they didn't. On November 16, 2013, 4 years and 5 weeks after the disappearance, 2 hunters found skeletal remains in the Smokestack Hollow area. 2 adults and a child. Face down. Side by side. 1.5 miles from where the truck had been found. On July 3, 2014, The Oklahoma office of the chief medical examiner confirmed the identities. Cause of death could not be determined. The condition of the bones, 4 years in forested terrain, made it impossible to establish with certainty what had killed those 3 people. But there are 3 details about the discovery that this file cannot ignore. The first, one of the hunters who found the remains stated that the skull of one of the adults, Bobby's, had a perforation that looked like a bullet wound. The forensic report did not confirm that conclusion, but it did not rule it out either. The hole was classified as possible post-mortem animal damage. That ambiguity remains. The second, the firearm Sherilynn was carrying, a .22 caliber pistol, was never found. Not in the truck, not in the surrounding area, not with the remains. The third is the hardest to explain under any available theory. Next to Madyson's remains, there was a dried flower. There was no flower next to the adult's remains. Madyson's photo. Bobby's phone was found inside the abandoned truck. On the phone, there were photographs. One of those photographs showed Madyson in the woods. It was taken the day they disappeared. The girl was standing among the trees, and she was wearing a red jacket. The problem is this: there are people who say Madyson was not wearing a red jacket that day. The authorities never publicly explained that detail. There is no official statement about the origin of the photograph, about who took it, or about the circumstances in which it was taken. If the photo was taken by Bobby or Sherilynn during the trip, there is nothing to explain. The discrepancy about the jacket could be a memory error, a mix-up about what clothes she had in her bag, something she put on during the day. But if the photo was taken by someone else, by someone who was in those woods that day and who had Bobby's phone in their hands, then the photograph of Madyson smiling between the trees is something else entirely. That is the point no theory fully accounts for. And that is the point this file cannot close. The things that vanished. The brown briefcase Sherilynn loaded into the truck in the security footage was never found. It wasn't in the truck when the hunters discovered it. It didn't turn up with the remains. No one knows what it contained. The .22 caliber pistol Sherilynn was carrying was also never found. Not anywhere. Not ever. If the family died accidentally in the woods, both of those objects should be somewhere near where they died. They are not. If the family was attacked and killed, those objects could have been taken by whoever killed them. If Sherilynn fired the weapon in any scenario, a casing should be somewhere in the area. None was found. In this file, the absences carry as much weight as the evidence that is there. The leading theory: homicide by a third party. The theory that carries the most weight in case analysis, and the one that can point to the most documented elements, is homicide at the hands of one or more unidentified individuals. The elements pointing in that direction, the position of the bodies, face down, side by side, is a pattern some forensic analysts associate with a killer who had a prior relationship with the victims. The perforation in Bobby's skull, though not confirmed as a bullet wound, was not ruled out either. The missing briefcase and firearm, the area's criminal history, the prior threats Bobby had received. The weaknesses are also in the file. There is no direct physical evidence of homicide, no identified suspect, no established motive. Most of the objects that could have constituted evidence are not available for analysis. The homicide theory is consistent with the available data. It cannot be verified with what exists. The alternative theory: deterioration and accident. There is a second reading of the case that also has a basis in the data. Bobby and Sherilynn were in a documented state of mental deterioration. It is possible they left the truck voluntarily and walked into the woods for reasons that made sense within their belief system but not outside of it. It is possible they became disoriented. It is possible the terrain and exhaustion did the rest. The weaknesses are just as real. Madyson was 6 years old. A 6-year-old girl does not walk a mile and a half through difficult mountain terrain without help. The position of the bodies, face down and together, is hard to explain as the result of a spontaneous collapse. The missing briefcase and firearm don't fit either. And the flower next to Madyson. If the family died alone in those woods, who left that flower? Theories the file cannot adopt. The cult or ritual organization theory comes from Sherilynn's mother's statement, which provided no name and no supporting evidence. The messages about witches and the Satanic Bible carry value as context for the family's mental state, not as evidence of third-party ritual activity. The beliefs around demonic possession are the framework through which Bobby and Sherilynn interpreted their own reality. The file documents them because they are essential to understanding who these people were. It does not adopt them as a theory about the cause of their deaths. And the theory that Madyson's photo was taken by a predator after her parents were already dead is the one that carries the most narrative weight, and the one that can be least verified or ruled out with the available data. What remains? The Jamison family case has 4 fractures that remain open, and none of them are small. The first, the cause of death, is officially undetermined. We do not know how Bobby, Sherilynn, and Madyson died. That question has no answer in the file. The second, if someone killed them, we don't know who or why. No suspect. No verified motive. No direct physical evidence of homicide that survived the years. The third, the brown briefcase and the .22 pistol were never found. Those objects exist in the footage and do not exist in the world after. And the fourth, the photograph of Madyson in the woods, wearing the red jacket. That photo exists. The phone it was on exists. The discrepancy about what she's wearing in it exists. And the official explanation for that detail does not exist. If it was taken by her parents during the day, there is nothing to explain. If it was taken by someone else, there is a question that redefines the entire case. Who was with that girl in those woods? The sheriff who investigated the case resigned before solving it because he couldn't bear the fact that he hadn't found Madyson's killer. It's a detail the file records without drama. The lead investigator used the word killer when describing why he left. Not unknown causes. Not accident. Killer. That is not evidence. But it's not nothing either. Beyond the case file. There's something in this case that should be named before closing it, because it's what sets it apart from most files in this archive. The mystery of the Jamison family did not begin in the Oklahoma woods. It began in that house. In the months Bobby spent seeing spirits on the roof and asking where to get special bullets for them. In the messages Sherilynn painted about witches on the walls of the storage unit. In the 6-year-old girl who talked with Emily. In the $32,000 that no one knows where they came from. In the father's threats. In the tenant driven out at gunpoint. In the security cameras installed out of fear. Before they disappeared, the Jamison family was already a closed system that had withdrawn from the outside world and built one of its own. A world where spirits were real, where regular bullets couldn't reach them, where the neighborhood had witches and their little girl had demons for friends. The question of what happened in those woods remains unanswered more than 15 years later. But there is another question the file has carried from the beginning, one that is rarely asked directly. What would it have taken for someone to help them before they ever reached those woods? Bobby, Sherilynn, and Madyson Jamison are dead. That is a fact. How they died is officially unknown. Who, if anyone, killed them is unknown. And on the phone Bobby left in the truck, there is a photograph of his 6-year-old daughter in the woods on the day they disappeared, wearing a jacket that raises a question the authorities never answered. The flower next to Madyson remains the smallest and most resonant detail in the entire file. Flowers don't grow beside people who have just died. Someone placed it there. It may have been one of her parents in their final moments. It may have been someone else. If it was someone else, that person was there. They saw that girl, and they left. X-File. We don't claim. We don't deny. We open the case. Jamison Family. Classification: open case. Cause of death: undetermined. If you made it this far, I want to ask you one question before you go. Not which theory seems most likely. Not whether you think a crime was committed. Just this: which detail in this case is hardest for you to explain? The money, the video, the photo, the flower. Files don't close with theories. They close with the right question asked at the right time. If you have something to add to the file, leave it in the comments. If this is your first case with us, there are more files waiting for you. If you've been here for a while, you already know how this works. Subscribe, hit the bell, and we'll see you in the next file.